Welcome to a place more alien than the bleak, dust-swept deserts of the lunar surface. It is a realm that exists right now, at this very moment, on our own home planet, yet it remains almost completely hidden, untouched, and fundamentally unknown to the vast majority of human civilization. We are embarking on an unprecedented descent, traveling down into the absolute deepest point of our world, the Mariana Trench. This isn't just a journey into a sunless expanse of water. It's a journey into the planet's deepest, most fiercely guarded secrets. As we descend, we will seek out the origins of the unexplained, mechanical echoes that reverberate along its steep rock walls, the fleeting glimpses of phantom creatures witnessed by the very first human travelers, and the staggering biological contradictions that call this underworld home, beings sculpted from delicate glass and utterly see-through predators that would literally dissolve into liquid if they were ever raised to our familiar, sunlit world. And as we sit in the cold, unyielding dark, we will confront a deeply quiet and unsettling mystery, the realization that a fragile, ordinary piece of human refuse, a simple plastic shopping bag, managed to cross into this untouched wilderness long before any human being ever did. What does it mean when our own ghosts outpace us into the deep? If this kind of slow, quiet exploration of the world's remaining mysteries is something you genuinely enjoy, I'd be incredibly grateful if you'd take a moment to leave a like and subscribe to Midnight Sleep Documentary. And if you feel inclined, please share with me in the comments down below exactly where you are listening from and what time it happens to be in your corner of the world. Reading those notes is always a quiet, grounding comfort during the long hours of the night. Now, let yourself settle into a comfortable, relaxed position. Dim the lamps around you, let your breathing grow steady and slow. Together, we are leaving the familiar boundaries of the map far behind. We are accustomed to treating that map as an absolute truth, a completed picture of a world with no remaining blank spaces. In our modern era, we look at the globe and see a puzzle that has been entirely solved, a landscape thoroughly conquered. We take comfort in the network of advanced satellites spinning through the heavens, tracing every street grid, charting every winding river system, and measuring the peak of the most isolated mountain ranges. Because we have captured detailed photographs of every square mile of dry land, we lull ourselves into the comforting belief that our world no longer holds any deep geographical mysteries. We view our continents as fully catalogued spaces, where every forest has been walked, every desert crossed, and every island charted with absolute mathematical precision. The modern mind rests easy, knowing that the Earth is pinned beneath the lens of 1,000 orbiting cameras, illuminated and exposed from pole to pole. We believe that human curiosity has pushed its flags into every corner, leaving no mystery untouched, no valley unnamed, and no mystery preserved from our insatiable drive to categorize reality. But that absolute confidence is merely a grand illusion maintained by those of us who live on the surface. The moment we reach the edge of the sea, our true maps simply cease to exist. When the charts we rely on attempt to depict the vast spaces hidden beneath the waves, they are not presenting reality, but rather a collection of educated guesswork, artistic interpretations, and incredibly vague, low-resolution acoustic measurements. These sonar passes map the grand topography of the seabed in broad, blurred strokes, leaving the fine details entirely lost in the dark. We stare at smooth blue renderings on our digital screens, unaware that these digital planes are actually just massive mathematical interpolations. They hide jagged peaks that have never seen the light, vast valleys that have never been touched, and immense canyons completely invisible to our most advanced orbital scanners. The marine world remains a massive blank canvas, hidden beneath a curtain of moving water that acts as an impenetrable shield against our desire for total knowledge. We are effectively blind to 70% of our own home, standing on the shore and pretending that the floor of the ocean looks exactly like the artistic drawings we have created to comfort our own sense of mastery. The immense span of the Mariana Trench stands as the ultimate, unyielding testament to our profound blindness. It exists as a massive, continuous scar cutting across the crust of our planet for 2,500 kilometers, a deep wound that has stubbornly and successfully turned away every single human effort to truly observe it. This colossal oceanic valley curves through the western Pacific floor like a jagged, black crescent, a monumental geographic feature that swallows our grandest technological ambitions whole. It is so incredibly massive that its scale defies our ordinary vocabulary, yet it remains completely invisible to the naked eye from the edge of the atmosphere. The fundamental reason for our collective ignorance is not a lack of curiosity, but rather a single absolute law of nature, the crushing reality of pressure. Up here, in the world of light, we move through our lives beneath a soft, invisible blanket of atmospheric air. Because it is gentle, we easily forget that it carries any weight at all. We walk through our cities and fields completely unaware that miles of gas are constantly pressing down upon our skin. It is a balanced, life-giving pressure to which our lungs and tissues are perfectly attuned. But the moment we plunge into the ocean, that weight begins to pile upon us with a brutal mathematical certainty. For every 10 meters we drop beneath the surface of the sea, the weight of an entire additional atmosphere is pressed down upon our bodies. The air disappears, replaced by a substance that is vastly more dense, unyielding, and heavy. With every single step down into the depths, the water gathers above us, stacking itself like layers of solid stone, pressing inward on every square inch of exposed surface, with a cold, mechanical intent. Now, let your mind contemplate a descent that goes down a full 7 miles, a plunge of 11,000 meters into the absolute dark. At the very floor of this immense chasm, the weight of the overhead water column is concentrated into an unimaginable force, pressing inward with a strength that is over 1,100 times more intense than the air pressure we are breathing right now. Think about the sheer volume of that water, miles upon miles of fluid, compressed by its own massive gravity, concentrated onto a single point at the bottom of the world. It is a weight that defies our comprehension. It equals the pressure of an entire fleet of commercial airliner jets, resting directly on a single human body, or several tons of force concentrated onto an area no larger than a standard postage stamp. This immense pressure operates as a completely inverted force, an environment where the ordinary rules of matter are entirely undone. It handles solid plates of reinforced steel as though they were nothing more than wet paper. It shatters and pulverizes dense bone effortlessly. The water is packed together so tightly by the weight of the miles above that it alters the fundamental behavior of chemistry and biochemistry. Ordinary molecular structures are forced to bend and warp. The delicate cellular membranes that allow life to function are squeezed so hard that they can no longer transport nutrients or pass signals. Enzymes lose their three-dimensional shapes, detaching from their molecular targets and halting the very chemistry of life. Metals alter their properties under this weight, and materials that are completely rigid on the surface begin to flow and deform like soft clay. It is an environment that actively deconstructs our technology, exploiting the tiniest microscopic pocket of air or the slightest structural imperfection to deliver a catastrophic, instantaneous implosion. When you think about it deeply, it becomes clear why reaching the surface of the moon posed an easier engineering challenge for humanity. The moon was a void, an empty vacuum that merely required us to bring our own artificial life support, filling the quiet space with our technology. In space, the pressure differential is only a single atmosphere. A thin wall of aluminum or a sheet of pressurized fabric is more than enough to hold back the emptiness of the cosmos. This deep chasm is the exact opposite of an empty void. It is an overbearing, physical presence, a suffocating weight that pushes back against our intrusion with the gathered mass of an entire ocean world. It doesn't ask you to bring life support. It actively, violently seeks to crush whatever life support you attempt to carry down into its domain. This is the true reason the map remains entirely blank at the bottom of the world. It is not because the chasm is devoid of features, but because it is completely filled with an unforgiving power that human biology was never designed to endure. It is a realm that knows exactly how to protect what is hidden within its walls. It remains an untouchable kingdom, secured by a lock made of water and gravity, turning away our cameras, short-circuiting our electronics, and keeping our most advanced scientific instruments at a distance. It is a place that holds its secrets well. And yet, when we envision that absolute depth, when we picture that crushing and total blackness, our minds almost automatically conjure a single, profound characteristic. We naturally assume that a place so entirely isolated from the sun and the air must be wrapped in a perfect, uninterrupted stillness. We imagine a pristine, absolute quiet down there, the kind of heavy, meditative silence that must surely govern a realm where not a single ray of sunlight can pierce, and where the warmth of the upper world is completely forgotten. In our thoughts, we picture a vast, empty void, completely detached from the chaotic noise of human civilization, industrial shipping lanes, and atmospheric weather. We tell ourselves that this deep underworld is the ultimate sanctuary of peace, an untouchable vault of stillness, where the sounds of the surface world are utterly extinguished by miles of fluid insulation. We comfort ourselves with the image of an eternal, quiet dark, a place where nothing ever speaks, nothing ever rings, and nothing ever disrupts the motionless calm of the bottommost mud. We envision the deep floor as a sensory deprivation chamber of planetary proportions, a place where acoustic waves go to die, swallowed by an infinite cushioning blanket of liquid that isolates the abyss from the frantic, noisy rhythms of human life far above. It feels comforting to believe that 7 miles down, the world has simply turned off its voice, leaving an eternal, undisturbed stillness that has remained unbroken since the very formation of the oceans. But that peaceful expectation, much like our incomplete charts, is entirely contradicted by reality. One of the most astonishing turnarounds in modern oceanography is the realization that this vast chasm is not a sanctuary of silence. In point of fact, it frequently manifests as one of the most acoustically active and loudest environments anywhere on the face of the globe. Over the course of recent years, oceanographers have systematically lowered highly sophisticated microphones, safely encased in thick protective hulls of titanium, directly into the absolute blackness of the Gulf. These specialized listening devices, known technically as hydrophones, were sent down with the explicit purpose of establishing a quiet baseline recording of the abyss. The researchers fully anticipated catching nothing more than a flat line of total quiet, a peaceful confirmation of their assumptions. Instead, the moment their instruments crossed into the deep, the recording meters were completely inundated with an overwhelming cascade of sound. The underlying explanation for this unexpected auditory assault is rooted deeply in the laws of basic physics and fluid dynamics. The highly specific, extreme convergence of immense water pressure, freezing temperature gradients, and immense depth creates a distinct layer that oceanographers designate as a deep sound channel. This specific layer of water functions as an incredibly vast, entirely natural sound amplifier and waveguide. Acoustic waves that find their way into this specialized channel are effectively trapped by the varying density and temperature profiles of the water, unable to break free or escape upward or downward. Consequently, the sound waves are forced to travel horizontally across vast distances, rippling out for thousands of kilometers, while surrendering almost none of their initial acoustic energy. It is a permanent, liquid corridor of sound that spans the globe, focused and funneled directly through the deepest corridors of the sea. Because sound travels roughly 4 times faster in water than it does in the air, this natural acoustic pipeline operates with terrifying efficiency, gathering whispers from across the hemisphere and concentrating them into the dark heart of the trench. It turns the silent deep into a concentrated listening post. And what, exactly, did these sensitive titanium hydrophones catch down in the dark? They captured the living, breathing movements of the Earth itself, recording the continuous, low-frequency groan and heavy scrape of the planet's massive tectonic plates as they grind endlessly against one another. The scientists were literally listening to the agonizing acoustic signature of the trench itself being torn open and shaped over geological time. The instruments caught the deep, rumbling signatures of massive underwater earthquakes, erupting half a world away, their tremors carrying effortlessly through the channel, like bass notes vibrating through a vast cathedral. Beyond the voice of the planet, the microphones captured the lingering ghosts of human activity far above. The distant, heavy thrumming churn of a massive supertanker's propellers, passing miles above the abyss, was picked up by the instruments as a constant, rhythmic, and deeply haunting acoustic hum. The rotation of mechanical shafts, the pounding of industrial piston engines, and the cavitation of giant bronze blades miles overhead were transformed into a persistent mechanical vibration that never leaves the canyon walls. Even the violent fury of a typhoon raging across the surface of the ocean was recorded, its vast atmospheric energy slamming into the sea and plunging down through the water column to leave a dark, acoustic imprint in the depths. Yet, perhaps the most profoundly haunting sounds captured by the titanium hydrophones were not the mechanical markers of ships or the tremors of the crust, but the unmistakable voices of marine life. The low, highly complex and mournful songs of baleen whales were recorded echoing through the darkness, originating from oceans away from the trench itself. A solitary whale call, once captured within the boundaries of this deep sound channel, is capable of radiating across an entire ocean basin without fading away into the background noise. The Great Abyss, as it turns out, behaves like a massive planetary echo chamber. It functions as a vast acoustic vault that systematically remembers, traps, and carries nearly every single deep sound generated by our world. We are left to realize that this sunless trench is never truly alone. It is constantly bathed in a chorus of planetary whispers, maritime engines, and biological calls that drift down from the light, reverberating through the heavy liquid dark long after the surface world has forgotten them. Every single one of these sounds, the groaning crust, the passing maritime fleets, the far-off whales, can be precisely identified by modern acoustic software. But the specific recordings that continue to deeply mystify and trouble oceanographic researchers are the persistent anomalies, the strange acoustic signatures that refuse to fit into any recognized category or known pattern of nature. These are the sounds that disrupt our neatly categorized scientific logs and remind us that we are still strangers to the abyss. Among these persistent acoustic mysteries, few have captivated and troubled the scientific community, quite like the strange auditory anomaly that came to be known as the Western Pacific Biotang. When this highly unusual sound was first captured by deep-sea hydrophones cutting through the darkness of the Mariana Trench, it sent a literal shockwave through the marine biology community. It was not a low, rhythmic drone like the mechanical thrum of a passing supertanker, nor was it the familiar, sweeping, melodic signature of a blue whale or a humpback singing to its pod across the open ocean basin. Instead, the sound was short, metallic, and mathematically complex, a bizarre two-part acoustic burst that sounded almost entirely structural, like something generated by an industrial machine operating deep within the rock walls. The initial phase of the sound consisted of a deep, rumbling grunt that vibrated through the dense, pressurized water column, but it was immediately followed by a soaring, high-frequency metallic ring that sounded like a giant steel cable being struck underwater. When oceanographers first analyzed the audio files using advanced acoustic software, they were utterly baffled by what they saw on the spectrographs. The sound wave possessed a frequency and structural composition that defied the known parameters of any recognized geological process or animal vocalization. For a long time, the phenomenon remained classified as an unexplained ambient anomaly, leading to frantic speculation about secret military sonar testing, deep earth seismic venting, or even some unknown form of mechanical technology moving through the sunless trenches. The sheer clarity of the sound, carrying perfectly through the deep sound channel, suggested an origin of immense acoustic power. It took years of patient, cross-disciplinary study and targeted acoustic tracking to finally decode the true nature of this haunting underwater signal. Ultimately, marine researchers discovered that this metallic, mechanical-sounding call belonged to a specific, elusive population of minke whales navigating the western Pacific waters. The revelation came as an absolute surprise to the scientific community, as nobody had ever documented a baleen whale producing an acoustic burst so sharp, metallic, and distinctly unbiological in structure. The discovery served as a humbling reminder of our profound lack of understanding when it comes to the complex behaviors of the planet's largest creatures. If a known, air-breathing mammal could hide such a radical acoustic secret in plain sight, it forced scientists to confront a far more unsettling reality. We are still functionally deaf and blind to the true nature of the life forms that inhabit the deeper, darker corridors of our own world. This realization that the deep sea still harbors vast, uncatalogued biological secrets almost naturally invites a different, much more sensational type of curiosity in the public imagination. Whenever people turn their eyes to the massive, black void of the Mariana Trench, their minds tend to skip past the subtle wonders of marine biology and leap directly into the realm of ancient monsters. There is a persistent, deeply rooted modern myth that refuses to die. The widespread belief that the absolute depths of the abyss serve as a hidden sanctuary for prehistoric terrors, most notably the colossal extinct shark known as Megalodon. This legendary apex predator, which dominated the ancient oceans millions of years ago with jaws large enough to swallow an entire vehicle, has become the ultimate poster child for what might be lurking just beyond the reach of our submarine lights. Books, films, and sensationalized documentaries have spent decades feeding the collective fantasy that this giant shark simply retreated down into the sunless chasm to escape extinction, adapting to the crushing dark where it continues to hunt in secret, completely untouched by the passage of geological time. From the unyielding perspective of marine biology and basic ocean physics, however, this popular hypothesis collapses completely under its own weight. The idea that a massive, warm-blooded apex predator like Megalodon could survive, let alone thrive, at the bottom of the Mariana Trench is an absolute biological impossibility. First and foremost, a massive shark of that scale requires an immense, continuous supply of highly caloric food to sustain its massive body weight and metabolic demands. In the ancient, sunlit oceans, Megalodon hunted massive baleen whales, large marine mammals, and abundant schools of giant fish, prey items that require sunlight, oxygen-rich surface waters, and thriving marine food webs to exist. The bottom of the trench, by absolute contrast, is a biological desert when it comes to large-scale biomass. There are no pods of whales migrating through the 7-mile dark. There are no dense schools of massive pelagic fish swimming through the freezing, pressurized mud. For a giant apex predator, trying to survive in the abyss would be equivalent to an elephant attempting to find enough forage to survive in the middle of a barren, sun-scorched desert. Furthermore, the physical environment of the deep chasm would completely deconstruct the anatomy of a surface-dwelling shark. Megalodon was built for the moderate pressures and warm to temperate temperatures of the upper water columns. At the floor of the trench, the water temperature hovers just barely above the freezing point, hovering between 1 and 4 degrees Celsius, and the pressure pushes inward with a force of 8 tons per square inch. This extreme cold and weight would instantly freeze the metabolic systems of a large shark, causing its cellular functions to lock up and halt entirely. The delicate cartilage that forms the skeletal structure of a shark is not designed to withstand the structural warping caused by such immense hydrostatic pressure. If you were to drop a megalodon down to these depths, its body would not adapt. It would be instantly crushed, frozen, and starved by an environment that is systematically hostile to the very design of large, fast-swimming predatory fish. Yet, the dismantling of this pop culture myth does not mean the abyss is devoid of true giants. It simply means that the real giants of the deep are far more sophisticated, strange, and beautifully adapted than the monsters of our imagination. Nature does not construct monsters in the dark. It builds survivalists. Instead of massive, tooth-filled sharks, the true rulers of the deep water columns are creatures like the giant squid and the elusive colossal squid. These animals have evolved over tens of millions of years to operate in a world of absolute shadow, processing their environment with eyes the size of large dinner plates, designed to capture the faintest glimmers of biological light. They move with a slow, ghostly efficiency, their tissues perfectly balanced to match the surrounding water pressure, ensuring they are never crushed by the weight of the miles above. They do not fight the abyss. They are a part of it, sharing its stillness and operating with a quiet elegance that makes our fictional monsters look crude and primitive by comparison. The true marvel of these real deep-sea giants is how they remind us of the incredible plasticity of life on Earth. They prove that life does not merely tolerate the most extreme environments our planet has to offer. It embraces them, rewriting the rules of biology, vision, and movement to colonize spaces that human technology can barely manage to visit for a few brief minutes at a time. The deep is not a hiding place for the dead remnants of the past. It is a vibrant, evolving kingdom occupied by specialized masters of the dark. And it was our desperate desire to catch a fleeting glimpse of this true, hidden kingdom that eventually drove humanity to design the very first vehicles capable of breaking through the heavy liquid wall of the trench, launching a historical era of exploration that would forever change our relationship with the absolute bottom of the world. This unyielding drive to look past the myths and confront the reality of the abyss directly set the stage for one of the most daring, dangerous, and utterly forgotten chapters in the history of human exploration. By the mid-20th century, humanity had successfully scaled the highest peaks of the Himalayas and was actively preparing to launch rockets into the vacuum of space. Yet the deepest floor of our own ocean remained entirely unvisited and untouched. The absolute bottom of the Mariana Trench was viewed by world governments and scientific institutions as an impossible destination, a place so fiercely protected by its crushing pressure that no vessel could ever hope to descend to its floor and return to the surface in one piece. To breach this barrier, engineers had to completely abandon the traditional design principles of standard military submarines and invent an entirely new class of vessel altogether, a deep-diving underwater balloon known as a bathyscaphe. The result of this radical engineering effort was a vessel named the Trieste, a strange, clumsy-looking craft that looked absolutely nothing like the sleek, hydrodynamic submarines of the era. Designed by the visionary Swiss physicist Auguste Piccard, the Trieste was fundamentally a vessel of complete contradictions. To survive the 8 tons of pressure per square inch at the bottom of the world, the crew compartment could not be a large, spacious cabin. Instead, it was a small, incredibly thick and heavy sphere forged from high tensile steel, with walls over 5 inches thick. This tiny steel ball was barely large enough to hold 2 grown men in a cramped, hunched-over position, leaving absolutely no room for movement, comfort, or error. Because this massive steel sphere was so incredibly heavy that it would instantly sink straight to the bottom like a stone, engineers had to attach it to a massive, 50-foot-long flotation tank filled with a substance that was lighter than water but completely incompressible, ordinary aviation gasoline. The physics behind the Trieste were beautifully simple yet terrifyingly absolute. The gasoline provided the necessary buoyancy to lift the heavy steel sphere back to the surface, while tons of iron ballast pellets, held in place by electromagnets, were used to control the rate of descent. If the electrical systems failed or the magnets lost power, the iron weights would automatically drop away, allowing the lighter-than-water gasoline tank to carry the crew sphere back up to the air. On the historic morning of January 23, 1960, 2 intrepid explorers, oceanographer Jacques Piccard, the son of the vessel's designer, and United States Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh climbed inside the cramped steel sphere, sealed the heavy hatch, and began a slow, solitary journey down into the absolute unknown, completely cut off from the rest of humanity. As the Trieste sank deeper and deeper into the western Pacific, the sunlit world quickly dissolved into a dim twilight, then into a deep indigo, and finally into an absolute, velvety blackness that had never seen the light of day. With every 1,000 meters they dropped, the pressure outside their steel walls piled upward with mechanical precision, squeezing the metal sphere with an unimaginable force. Inside the cabin, the temperature began to plummet, matching the freezing environment of the deep water column, causing condensation to form and freeze along the interior walls. The two men sat huddled together in the cold, listening to the creak and groan of the metal hull as it adjusted to the immense weight pressing inward from all sides. At a depth of over 30,000 feet, a sudden, loud, and terrifying bang reverberated through the capsule, shaking the entire vessel. One of the outer plexiglass viewing windows had cracked under the pressure, sending a jolt of pure adrenaline through the crew. They were miles beneath the surface, completely beyond the reach of any rescue, knowing that the slightest structural failure would result in an instantaneous implosion that would vaporize them in a fraction of a millisecond. Despite the terrifying sound, Piccard and Walsh made the incredibly brave decision to push forward, allowing the Trieste to continue its slow, blind drift downward toward the ocean floor. After nearly 5 grueling hours of descent through the silent dark, the vessel's exterior spotlights finally caught a reflection below, illuminating a vast, flat plain of pale, ivory-colored silt. The bathyscaphe gently touched down on the seabed, kicking up a thick cloud of fine sediment that drifted through the beams of light like a localized blizzard. They had done it. They had successfully reached the Challenger Deep, the absolute lowest point on the face of the Earth, a depth later measured at approximately 10,911 meters. For 20 brief minutes, the two men sat at the absolute bottom of the world, staring out of their remaining viewing port into an underworld that had remained hidden since the dawn of creation. It was a moment of profound, almost religious isolation. Two human beings trapped inside a tiny bubble of air, protected by 5 inches of steel from a crushing ocean that desperately wanted to get in. But what they witnessed in those fleeting moments would forever shatter the scientific assumptions of the era and ignite a lingering, deeply haunting controversy that continues to provoke debate among oceanographers and historians to this day. As the Trieste rested heavily upon the floor of the Challenger Deep, the fine sediment kicked up by its landing began to slowly drift away in the current, revealing a view that would permanently upend the scientific consensus of the 20th century. Before this historic dive, the prevailing assumption among terrestrial biologists was that the absolute bottom of the ocean was a completely sterile wasteland. It was thought that no complex life, particularly high-order vertebrates, could possibly survive the dual terrors of absolute, freezing darkness and a hydrostatic pressure pushing inward with 8 tons of force on every square inch of surface. The deep trenches were viewed as vast oceanic graveyards, devoid of anything but specialized bacteria and microscopic single-celled organisms that fed on the faint organic dust drifting down from the sunlit world above. Yet, as Jacques Piccard leaned close to the thick plexiglass viewing port, straining his eyes against the stark glare of the exterior floodlights, he saw something that left him utterly breathless. There, resting calmly on the white, powdery silt directly beneath the hull, was a living creature. Piccard described it as a type of flatfish, roughly a foot long, resembling a common sole or flounder. According to his immediate logs, the animal did not appear to be distressed by the presence of the massive metal intruder, nor was it deformed by the immense weight of the 7 miles of water pressing down upon its body. Instead, it waved its translucent fins with a slow, ghostly elegance, effortlessly swimming across the seabed before disappearing into the surrounding darkness. Moments later, Don Walsh spotted another life form, a small, delicate, shrimp-like crustacean that darted through the water column, its fragile body completely unbothered by an environment that would instantly flatten an armored battle tank. This fleeting, spectral encounter at the very bottom of the world sent shockwaves through the global scientific community when the two explorers returned to the surface. If Picard's observations were accurate, it meant that complex vertebrate life had somehow found a way to conquer the most hostile, extreme environment on the planet. It suggested that the evolutionary boundaries of the animal kingdom were far more elastic and resilient than anyone had ever dared to dream. The idea that a fish, an animal with eyes, a brain, a spine, and internal organs, could swim casually through a pressure cooker of such planetary proportions challenged the fundamental laws of marine biology and fluid mechanics as they were understood at the time. However, as the initial waves of public excitement began to cool, a quiet, lingering controversy began to take root among specialized ichthyologists and oceanographic researchers. Many prominent scientists openly questioned Picard's identification of the creature, suggesting that what the explorer had actually witnessed was not a true flatfish at all. Skeptics argued that from a purely physiological standpoint, a true bottom-dwelling flatfish like a flounder belongs to a class of marine life that simply cannot tolerate the extreme cellular disruptions caused by Hadal zone pressures. They posited that Picard, peering through a thick, distorting conical window in a freezing, highly stressed environment, had likely misidentified a large, flattened invertebrate, such as a sea cucumber or a specialized marine worm whose gelatinous body composition is naturally suited to the deep. This academic debate raged for decades, turning the phantom fish of the Trieste into one of the most polarizing and tantalizing mysteries in the annals of ocean exploration. For more than half a century, that polarizing mystery remained suspended in the freezing dark of the Challenger Deep, completely safely protected from further human scrutiny. The immense technical difficulty, astronomical financial costs, and sheer physical danger of sending humans down to the absolute bottom of the world meant that the path forged by the Trieste was left entirely cold. No nation, navy, or scientific institution stepped forward to repeat the journey, leaving Picard and Walsh's 20-minute stay as a lonely, solitary milestone in human history. The floor of the trench slipped back into its ancient patterns of undisturbed silence and shadow, its secrets guarded once more by the unyielding barrier of hydrostatic weight. It was not until the year 2012 that a lone individual possessed the rare combination of immense resources, engineering obsession, and raw courage necessary to break through that barrier once again. That individual was filmmaker and explorer James Cameron. Having spent years studying the deep ocean and designing advanced underwater camera systems for his maritime expeditions, Cameron set out to achieve what many experts still considered a reckless and borderline suicidal endeavor: a solitary descent to the absolute lowest point on Earth, using an entirely new type of submarine that he helped design and build from scratch. This revolutionary vessel, named the Deepsea Challenger, was a radical departure from the clumsy, gasoline-filled design of the mid-20th century bathyscaphe. Instead of a massive, horizontal flotation tank, the Deepsea Challenger was a sleek, vertical needle of technology, designed to drop through the water column like a high-speed torpedo. The core innovation of the craft lay in its structural material. Rather than relying on heavy steel or volatile fuel to achieve buoyancy, the entire body of the submarine was constructed from a highly advanced, proprietary material known as isofoam, a specialized syntactic foam composed of millions of microscopic hollow glass spheres suspended in an epoxy resin. This space-age material achieved a brilliant engineering paradox. It was lighter than water, providing natural buoyancy, yet it possessed a structural density capable of withstanding the full, crushing force of the Hadal depths without compressing or deforming by even a fraction of a millimeter. At the base of this vertical foam needle sat the crew compartment, a beautifully compact, highly engineered sphere forged from a single piece of high-grade titanium. The interior was so tightly confined that Cameron had to sit with his knees permanently bent, his head pressed close to the control screens, wrapped in an array of advanced life support systems, 3D cameras, and emergency recovery controls. On March 26, 2012, the Deepsea Challenger was lowered into the rolling waves of the Western Pacific, uncoupled from its surface support ship, and allowed to plunge straight down into the abyss. Cameron's solo descent was a masterclass in modern engineering and psychological endurance. Unlike the 5-hour drift of the Trieste, the streamlined Deepsea Challenger cut through the water column with incredible speed, dropping through the twilight zone, past the midnight zone, and into the uncharted depths of the Hadal realm in just over 2.5 hours. Inside the tiny titanium sphere, the temperature dropped to near freezing, and the heavy silence of the deep was broken only by the hum of internal fans and the occasional, crisp status updates transmitted via an acoustic digital communication system to the surface team miles above. When the submarine's high-intensity LED light arrays finally illuminated the floor of the Challenger Deep, they revealed a landscape that looked starkly different from the one described by the crew of the Trieste. Instead of an active biological haven filled with swimming flatfish, Cameron found himself staring at a vast, desolate, and utterly alien plain of pale, gelatinous mud. The landscape was completely devoid of visible motion, tracks, or macroscopic life forms. It felt, as Cameron would later describe in his journals, like a completely pristine, untouched desert, a place of total, absolute isolation that felt entirely disconnected from the vibrant, living world of the surface. For several hours, Cameron navigated his vessel across this pale expanse, using a specialized robotic arm to collect core samples of the sediment and capturing the very first ultra-high-definition video footage of the absolute bottom of the world. Yet, even as he marveled at the pristine, alien beauty of this sunless landscape, his instruments began to fail one by one under the relentless, crushing weight of the water column. The submarine's hydraulic systems began to leak fluid, disabling the robotic sampling arm, and several of the external thrusters mysteriously stopped responding, making navigation increasingly difficult and dangerous. Realizing that his window of safety was rapidly closing, Cameron released his heavy iron drop weights, allowing the syntactic foam body of the Deepsea Challenger to carry him back toward the sunlit world. While Cameron did not encounter the mysterious phantom fish of 1960 during his brief stay, his historic solo dive successfully proved that modern materials science could tame the immense pressure of the abyss, opening the door for a new era of systematic scientific investigation. The data gathered during those few hours on the bottom provided researchers with an invaluable baseline, revealing that the floor of the trench was not a static uniform plane, but a dynamic geological feature shaped by currents and seismic tremors that human technology was only beginning to perceive. The vertical configuration of his craft offered a template for future autonomous vehicles, establishing that heavy gas-filled hulls were no longer necessary to breach the deep. Yet, the true impact of the expedition lay in the psychological shift it forced within the scientific community, transforming the Mariana Trench from an abstract, mythologized abyss into a tangible workspace where precise biological and geological questions could finally be asked and answered. This transition from historical reconnaissance to modern exploration illuminated a stark truth. The deepest parts of our planet are intrinsically linked to the surface world, bound by the same physical laws and fluid networks that govern our atmosphere and continents. The realization that an individual could sit in a titanium sphere at the bottom of the world and communicate directly with a vessel floating in the sunlight dismantled the illusion of the trench as an isolated alien world, revealing it instead as a deeply integrated part of our shared environment. But as the images captured by the deep-sea cameras were analyzed in laboratories across the globe, a subtle, underlying tension began to emerge among researchers. The absence of large, visible creatures in the footage did not signify an absence of life. but rather highlighted our ongoing inability to see the microscopic and molecular adaptations that allow organisms to thrive beneath miles of heavy water column. The hunt for answers was no longer a race to simply touch the bottom, but a complex, multi-layered quest to understand the chemical and biological limits of existence itself. Every sample of pale mud retrieved by the robotic arms carried within it an intricate narrative of survival, containing dormant spores, specialized single-celled entities, and chemical traces that had remained undisturbed for millennia. These findings forced oceanographers to re-examine the historical logs of previous expeditions, bridging the gap between the raw observations of early pioneers and the cold, empirical evidence provided by modern digital sensors. The deep was yielding its secrets slowly, demanding an extraordinary level of patience and technological sophistication from those who sought to map its internal dynamics. And as we reflect on this modern phase of exploration, the focus shifts away from the sheer mechanics of descent and moves toward the profound ecological revelations that occurred when human instruments began to probe the chemical composition of the trench's resident organisms. The line separating our world from the abyss was becoming increasingly blurred, setting the stage for a much deeper, more unsettling confrontation with the true reach of human activity on this planet. When modern scientific expeditions began systematically analyzing the biological samples and core sediments retrieved from the deepest corridors of the Mariana Trench, they expected to find a pristine genetic archive, a completely isolated sanctuary preserving the ancient, chemical signatures of a pre-industrial Earth. Because the Hadal Zone is separated from our daily lives by miles of heavy, sunless water, it seemed logical to assume that this deep underworld would be the very last place to feel the heavy hand of human environmental carelessness. But this comforting expectation was shattered when marine biologists examined the tissues of tiny, shrimp-like crustaceans called amphipods captured at the bottom of the Challenger Deep. When the chemical profiles of these specialized creatures were mapped in laboratories, researchers discovered staggering concentrations of highly toxic, synthetic industrial chemicals, including polychlorinated biphenyls and polybrominated diphenyl ethers. These artificial compounds, which were widely manufactured throughout the 20th century for use in electrical equipment, plastics, and flame retardants, had systematically migrated down through the global marine food web. As surface-dwelling organisms died, their contaminated remains drifted down to the sea floor as organic debris, where they were consumed by the resident scavengers of the trench. The results revealed that the concentration of these long-lasting pollutants in the bodies of creatures living 7 miles deep was actually significantly higher than the levels found in marine animals inhabiting heavily polluted coastal rivers and industrial estuaries near major human population centers. The abyss had acted as an immense, natural sink, trapping our chemical ghosts at the bottom of the world. This dark realization that human careless pollution had compromised the deepest trench on Earth, long before our manned exploratory vessels ever arrived, serves as a stark reminder of how intrinsically connected the abyss is to the global environment. The trench does not exist in a vacuum. It is shaped and fueled by the grand, violent mechanisms of the planet's changing geology. To truly understand the origin of this massive oceanic canyon, we must turn our attention away from the biological networks and look directly at the immense, slow-motion mechanical forces that tear the Earth's crust apart at the very edges of the western Pacific Plate. The Mariana Trench is not a simple structural crack or a static canyon. It is the direct, monumental result of a colossal planetary collision known to geologists as a subduction zone. At this specific boundary, two immense tectonic plates, the ancient, massive Pacific Plate and the younger, smaller Philippine Plate, clash against one another in a slow-motion battle of raw planetary mass. The Pacific Plate, moving steadily westward across the hemisphere for millions of years, is incredibly dense, heavy, and saturated with water. As it slams into the lighter rock of the Philippine Plate, the heavier Pacific Plate is forced to bend, buckle and plunge violently downward into the hot, semi-liquid mantle of the Earth. This process of subduction is a display of unimaginable physical force operating over vast geological timeframes. As the massive plate is forced downward, it drags the overlying edge of the crust down along with it, creating a deep, asymmetric, V-shaped trough that descends miles beneath the surrounding ocean floor. The sheer weight of the descending slab is so immense that it pulls the entire region into a state of permanent geological tension, creating a continuous zone of deformation that spans the entire length of the 2,500-kilometer crescent. It is a landscape defined by an absolute, unyielding grind, where solid basaltic rock is subjected to pressures and temperatures that force it to behave like a slow-moving, viscous fluid. This immense structural bending does not happen smoothly or quietly. As the Pacific Plate slides beneath its neighbor, the two colossal masses of solid rock frequently lock against one another, their jagged surfaces catching and jamming under the weight of the ocean above. The tectonic plates continue to push forward, but the friction at the boundary holds them fast, causing a massive, terrifying accumulation of elastic energy within the rock strata. For decades, or even centuries, this energy builds up silently in the dark, compressing the crust like a giant mechanical spring. When the structural limits of the rock are finally breached, the locked boundary gives way in a fraction of a second, releasing centuries of built-up tectonic stress in an instantaneous, violent snap. The resulting megathrust earthquakes are among the most powerful and destructive seismic events our planet is capable of producing, sending massive shockwaves ripping through the water column and triggering devastating tsunamis that can race across entire ocean basins at the speed of a jet airliner. The Deep Trench is the literal birthplace of these planetary tremors, a place where the foundational crust of our world is systematically shattered, melted, and recycled back into the fiery interior of the Earth, ensuring that the landscape of the abyss remains in a state of permanent, slow-motion transformation. This continuous shattering of the crust at the subduction zone creates an intricate network of deep faults and fissures that puncture the sea floor, allowing seawater to seep deep into the scorching, active interior of the mantle. As this water is drawn down into the subterranean furnaces of the Earth, it is heated to extreme temperatures, dissolved with a complex cocktail of minerals, gases, and toxic compounds, and forced back upward through the rocky crust under immense volcanic pressure. The result is a series of hydrothermal vent fields that line the slopes of the trench, turning sections of the freezing, sunless abyss into a landscape of boiling, chemical-spewing chimneys. Among these hydrothermal wonders, few are as profoundly strange or geologically unique as the Champagne vents, discovered by automated research rovers exploring the hydrothermal arcs near the western edge of the trench. Unlike typical deep-sea vents that spew streams of superheated water and sulfurous mud, the Champagne vents produce a continuous, shimmering plume of pure, liquid carbon dioxide. Because the immense hydrostatic pressure at this depth compresses gases into a superdense state, the carbon dioxide cannot exist as a gas. Instead, it emerges from the rocky conduits as thousands of tiny, pearlescent liquid droplets that rise slowly through the water column like bubbles in a freshly poured glass of champagne. The chemistry of this environment is astonishingly hostile to ordinary biology. The continuous release of liquid carbon dioxide, combined with high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide and acidic compounds, turns the surrounding water into a highly corrosive, toxic soup with a pH level that approaches the acidity of common household vinegar. This extreme chemical profile should, by all known rules of terrestrial biology, render the site a completely dead, sterile zone. The water is so intensely acidic that it dissolves the calcium carbonate shells of ordinary marine organisms almost on contact, making it impossible for standard shellfish or corals to establish a foothold. Yet, when scientific cameras first focused on the rock faces surrounding the Champagne vents, they discovered an ecosystem that was thriving in the midst of this toxic chemical cascade. The white, mineral-encrusted chimneys were covered in dense, writhing mats of specialized extremophile bacteria that had learned to utilize the toxic sulfur and carbon dioxide as a direct source of metabolic energy through chemosynthesis. Crawling over these bacterial mats were vast colonies of highly adapted, translucent crabs and specialized limpets that had evolved unique protein coatings to shield their bodies from the corrosive, acidic water. This environment demonstrated that life does not require the gentle warmth of the sun or a neutral chemical balance to conquer the Earth. It merely requires a source of energy and the evolutionary plasticity to turn a toxic planetary wound into a thriving home. As we move deeper along the volcanic slopes, leaving the shimmering liquid carbon dioxide of the Champagne vents behind, the hydrothermal systems take on an even more intense, threatening character. The fissures in the cracked basaltic crust descend further into the subterranean magmatic chambers, superheating the circulating seawater to temperatures that easily exceed 400 degrees Celsius. Under normal atmospheric conditions on the surface, water would instantly flash into steam long before reaching this point, but the immense weight of the miles of ocean above prevents boiling, keeping the fluid in a superheated, ultra-dense liquid state. This superheated water dissolves massive quantities of metallic sulfides, copper, iron, and zinc from the surrounding volcanic rock as it surges back upward toward the sea floor. The moment this scorching, mineral-saturated fluid erupts out into the freezing, near-zero water of the deep trench, the dissolved metals instantly precipitate out of solution, forming towering, pitch-black chimneys that oceanographers call black smokers. These grand mineral structures rise out of the seabed like the industrial smokestacks of a sunless factory, spewing thick, turbulent plumes of dark, toxic chemicals into the water column. The physical parameters surrounding a black smoker represent one of the most extreme, radical thermal gradients found anywhere on the face of the planet. Within the space of just a few inches, the water temperature drops from a scorching, metal-melting 400 degrees Celsius inside the vent plume to the near-freezing ambient temperature of the surrounding deep ocean. This rapid transition creates a turbulent, highly unstable microenvironment where the physical structures of life are subjected to immense thermal and chemical stress. Yet, despite this absolute hostility, the black smokers of the Mariana Trench are surrounded by some of the most densely populated, biologically rich ecosystems in the entire ocean world. The foundational engine of these sunless oases is a diverse array of specialized, heat-loving microbes that use the erupted hydrogen sulfide as fuel to construct complex organic molecules. These microscopic organisms form the base of a unique food chain that supports giant tube worms, specialized predatory fish, and vast swarms of blind shrimp that possess specialized light-sensitive patches on their backs, designed to detect the faint, invisible infrared glow emitted by the superheated vent openings. It is a world completely independent of the sun, an ecosystem that could continue to thrive in absolute comfort even if the surface of our planet were entirely frozen over or destroyed by a cosmic catastrophe. The discovery of these thriving, self-sustaining ecosystems in the absolute dark has forced astrobiologists and evolutionary chemists to fundamentally re-evaluate their theories regarding the very origin of life on our planet. For generations, it was assumed that the first living organisms must have sparked to life in a warm, sunlit tidal pool on the surface of the early Earth, fueled by solar radiation and atmospheric gases. But the existence of the black smokers suggests a far more intriguing possibility, that life may have actually been born in the deep, volcanic crucibles of the ocean floor, utilizing the rich chemical energy of hydrothermal vents to ignite the first metabolic pathways before migrating upward to conquer the light. The profound realization that the deep, volcanic crucibles of the ocean floor could serve as the literal birthplace of terrestrial biology naturally shifts our focus to the unique evolutionary strategies required to survive in the wider, non-vent environments of this underworld. Away from the localized warmth and rich chemical output of the hydrothermal fields lies the true, vast expanse of the Hadal Zone, an immense, freezing underworld that stretches from a depth of 6,000 meters all the way down into the lowest mud of the Challenger Deep. This is a realm completely divorced from the active volcanic chimneys, a place where life cannot rely on a steady stream of superheated minerals to fuel its metabolism. Instead, the organisms that inhabit these vast, sunless plains must adapt to a world defined by absolute structural isolation, perpetual near-freezing temperatures, and a hydrostatic pressure that relentlessly forces the very molecules of life to reshape themselves. To survive in this broader Hadal underworld, the resident organisms have had to completely rewrite the standard rules of vertebrate physiology. This is beautifully demonstrated by the undisputed monarch of the absolute depths, a creature known as the Mariana snailfish. To the casual observer, this small, pale animal looks shockingly fragile, resembling a translucent, oversized tadpole rather than a hardened survivor of the world's most hostile environment. Its skin is completely devoid of protective scales, manifesting instead as a loose, gelatinous layer that allows its body to remain perfectly flexible under immense weight. It moves through the dark with a slow, ghostly efficiency, its tiny form completely unbothered by a pressure that would instantly crush the reinforced titanium hull of an exploratory submarine. The secret to the snailfish's incredible resilience lies deep within its cellular and molecular biology. At these extreme depths, ordinary cell membranes become completely rigid, locking up like solid glass and preventing the transport of essential nutrients and electrical signals. To combat this crushing solidification, the Mariana snailfish has evolved an exceptionally high concentration of unsaturated fatty acids within its cellular walls, ensuring that its membranes remain fluid, flexible, and fully functional. Furthermore, its proteins are stabilized by a specialized organic molecule called trimethylamine N-oxide, which acts as a microscopic shield, preventing the immense hydrostatic pressure from warping and deconstructing the delicate three-dimensional shapes of the enzymes that drive its metabolism. The snailfish does not fight the crushing weight of the 7-mile water column. It incorporates that weight into its very biochemistry, creating a body structure that is so perfectly attuned to the abyss that the animal would literally swell and dissolve if it were ever raised to the low-pressure world of the surface. As we look past the translucent form of the snailfish, we begin to perceive an entire invisible kingdom of glass and shadow dominating the wider Hadal plains. Because the extreme pressure makes it incredibly difficult for organisms to synthesize calcium carbonate, the structural material used by surface-dwelling creatures to build thick shells and rigid bones, the residents of the trench have turned to alternative materials. Many specialized single-celled organisms, known as xenophyrophores, construct vast, intricate defensive structures out of pure silica, essentially building delicate, microscopic castles of glass in the mud. These silent, translucent entities carpet large sections of the trench floor, acting as vital biofilters that process the organic dust drifting down from the upper world, proving that even in a realm devoid of sunlight, life will always find a way to forge beauty and structure out of the raw chemistry of the earth. This reliance on glass and transparency extends far beyond the microscopic entities of the sediment, shaping the predatory strategies of the larger macrofauna that roam the water columns. In a world of absolute, perpetual darkness, the traditional rules of hunting and camouflage are entirely undone. Many specialized predatory fish and crustaceans have completely abandoned the use of vision, evolving long, delicate sensory antennae and complex lateral line systems that allow them to detect the faintest vibrations or chemical trails left by passing prey. Others have turned the darkness into a deadly weapon, utilizing highly advanced forms of biological light or bioluminescence to hunt. These hunters project faint, cold glimmers of light from specialized organs on their bodies, using the illumination to lure curious prey items directly into their unyielding, needle-sharp jaws, transforming the silent dark into a highly sophisticated, multi-layered arena of survival. Every sample of pale mud, every fleeting video frame captured by our deep-sea probes, and every unique biochemical pathway mapped in our laboratories continues to reveal that the Mariana Trench is not a lonely graveyard, but a vibrant, evolving extension of our shared biosphere. It is a world that demands an extraordinary level of humility from those who seek to explore it. A place where our most advanced technological creations are systematically tested against the absolute laws of physics and gravity. And as we continue our slow, quiet descent into the remaining secrets of this sunless chasm, we are left to realize that the line separating our sunlit world from the cold reality of the abyss is far thinner and more fragile than we ever cared to believe. The adaptation of these hadal life forms highlights a fundamental shift in how we understand evolutionary pressure. In the upper tiers of the ocean, organisms fight one another for space, sunlight, and resources. Down here, the primary adversary is the environment itself. The structural integrity of a cell, the flexibility of a bone, and the stability of a metabolic enzyme are the metrics by which survival is measured. There is no room for excess energy expenditure. Every movement must be calculated, every biological process optimized to function within the narrowest parameters of energy efficiency. The scarcity of food means that scavengers must possess an acute ability to locate the fallen remnants of the upper world from miles away, navigating the featureless mud plains with an unerring sense of chemical orientation. This deep-sea economy of energy shapes the entire behavioral landscape of the trench. Large scavengers, like the giant amphipods that gather in thousands around organic falls, possess specialized digestive enzymes that allow them to gorge on wood, bone, and dense tissues that other animals find completely indigestible. They can survive for months or even years between major meals, entering a state of semi-torpor to conserve their precious metabolic reserves until the next carcass drifts down through the water column. This strategy of patience and endurance is the true hallmark of hadal life, a quiet defiance of an environment designed to starve and crush anything that dares to cross its borders. Furthermore, the physical isolation of the individual troughs within the Mariana Trench system has turned these deep basins into isolated biological islands. Because the ridges separating the deep pockets rise into shallower, lower-pressure zones, many hadal species are effectively trapped within their specific trenches, unable to cross the physical barriers without experiencing catastrophic physiological distress. This has led to high levels of endemism, where specific populations of snailfish, amphipods, and microbes have evolved in complete isolation from one another, developing distinct genetic variations and chemical strategies tailored to their localized habitats. The trench is not a uniform corridor of life, but a complex archipelago of deep-sea sanctuaries, each holding its own unique chapter in the history of planetary adaptation. When we consider the vast timescales required for these specialized traits to emerge, the intrusion of human activity into this ancient system feels all the more disruptive. The synthetic chemicals found in the tissues of hadal amphipods represent a profound breakdown of the natural barriers that have protected the deep for millions of years. It reminds us that our industrial footprint is not confined to the land or the atmosphere. It flows downward, following the natural circulation patterns of the global ocean to concentrate its toxicity in the very places we considered untouchable. The abyss is a mirror reflecting our carelessness, an archive that records our industrial history in the chemistry of its most resilient inhabitants. As our scientific instruments probe further into these genetic and chemical archives, the data they retrieve is dismantling the old paradigms of isolation and independence. We are learning that the deep sea plays a critical role in regulating the planet's carbon cycle, trapping vast quantities of organic material within its sediments and acting as a long-term stabilizer for the global climate. The health of the Hadal zone is intrinsically tied to the stability of the surface world, and the disruption of these deep ecosystems could have cascading effects that ripple upward through the marine food webs to alter the balance of life across the entire planet. The exploration of the Mariana Trench is therefore shifting away from a quest for technological triumph and moving toward a vital mission of environmental understanding. It is no longer enough to simply touch the bottom or film the desolation. We must learn to read the subtle signals written in the mud and the glass, decoding the complex relationships that bind the absolute depths to the atmosphere we breathe. The journey into the abyss is a journey into our own future, a sobering confrontation with the consequences of our choices, and an invitation to view our planet as a single, fragile, and beautifully integrated whole. And so, we leave the silent kingdom of glass and shadow behind, allowing the deep currents to sweep us along the dark contours of the trench wall as we prepare to confront the final, most mysterious dynamics of this underworld. The shadows hold their ground, turning away our curiosity with an unyielding weight, yet the faint glimmers of biological light continue to signal that even in the ultimate dark, life remains undefeated, waiting for the day when our understanding catches up to its extraordinary reality. Leaving the fragile ecosystems of the wider Hadal Plains behind, we shift our attention downward, deeper into the structural foundations of the Mariana Trench, where the very bedrock of the ocean floor is subjected to continuous geological violence. As we trace the asymmetric rock walls of this crescent-shaped chasm, we are entering a zone of permanent deformation, where the physical crust of our planet is being systematically torn apart, fractured, and reshaped by forces that operate on a truly monumental scale. It is an environment where the heavy basaltic rock under our feet is not a static platform, but an active participant in a slow-motion tectonic collapse, shattered into an intricate network of deep faults and fissures that extend for miles into the burning mantle below. These deep tremors are the direct result of the immense, unyielding friction that defines the subduction interface. As the colossal Pacific plate plunges beneath the lighter Philippine plate, it does not slide smoothly. Rather, it catches, jams, and binds under the unimaginable mass of the overhead ocean column. This mechanical locking forces the rock strata to act like a giant planetary spring, compressing and storing vast amounts of elastic energy over decades and centuries. When the structural boundaries of the stone finally fail, the resulting release of energy is instantaneous and catastrophic, generating powerful megathrust earthquakes that send profound seismic shockwaves ripping through the water column and vibrating across the entire hemisphere. The sheer violence of these events alters the topography of the abyss in an instant, shifting millions of tons of sediment and tearing open fresh fissures that expose the glowing interior of the planet to the freezing ocean water. This continuous shattering of the basaltic crust creates a highly fractured subterranean landscape, a network of open pathways that allows cold, dense seawater to seep deep into the scorching, active interior of the Earth. As this fluid is drawn down into the intense planetary furnaces, it undergoes a radical transformation, superheating far past its surface boiling point and dissolving an incredibly complex cocktail of minerals, volatile gases, and heavy chemical compounds from the surrounding mantle rock. Driven by immense volcanic pressure, this altered, mineral-saturated fluid is forced back upward toward the sea floor, erupting out of the deep fissures to form unique hydrothermal systems that fundamentally alter the local chemistry of the sunless abyss. The rock pathways act as industrial conduits, filtering and concentrating rare earth elements, sulfurous compounds, and heavy metals until the fluid becomes a hyper-reactive chemical agent capable of instantly altering any matrix it touches. Among these hydrothermal features, few are as profoundly strange or geologically unique as the specialized fields known to oceanographers as the Champagne vents. Discovered by automated research rovers mapping the volcanic arcs along the western edge of the trench, these vents introduce an environment that challenges our basic understanding of planetary chemistry. Unlike typical deep-sea hydrothermal systems that spew dark plumes of mineral-rich water and sulfurous mud, the Champagne vents produce a continuous, shimmering plume composed almost entirely of pure, liquid carbon dioxide. The sight of these shimmering columns rising through the darkness is both mesmerizing and deeply alien, creating a surreal landscape where the boundaries between liquid and gas dissolve completely under the influence of extreme physics. The physical mechanics governing these vents are a direct byproduct of the extreme hydrostatic pressure of the Hadal zone. On the surface world, carbon dioxide exists naturally as a gas, but under the crushing weight of miles of ocean water, gases are compressed into a super-dense state. At this depth, the pressure forces the erupting carbon dioxide to bypass its gaseous phase entirely, emerging from the rocky conduits as thousands of tiny, pearlescent, liquid droplets that rise slowly through the dark water column like bubbles in a freshly poured glass of sparkling wine. This constant ascent of liquid pearls creates a dynamic, vertical conveyor of carbon, carrying essential elements away from the tectonic boundary and dispersing them into the wider deep-sea currents that trace the edges of the canyon walls. The localized chemical environment created by this continuous release of liquid carbon dioxide is astonishingly hostile to ordinary terrestrial biology. As the super-dense fluid mixes with the surrounding seawater, it releases high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide and highly acidic compounds, lowering the pH level of the water until it approaches the acidity of common household vinegar. This extreme acidity actively targets and dissolves the calcium carbonate structures used by ordinary surface-dwelling marine organisms to build protective shells and rigid skeletons, turning the water into a highly corrosive, toxic soup that should, by all known rules of biology, render the site a completely dead and sterile zone. The water is so intensely reactive that standard scientific instruments, if not adequately protected by specialized non-corrosive coatings, will begin to degrade within hours of exposure to the vent plumes. Yet, when automated cameras first illuminated the mineral-encrusted chimneys of the Champagne vent, they revealed a highly specialized ecosystem thriving directly within the path of this toxic chemical cascade. The rock faces were completely carpeted in thick, writhing mats of extremophile bacteria that have evolved to process toxic sulfur and carbon dioxide as a direct source of metabolic energy through chemosynthesis. Crawling across these pale bacterial fields were vast colonies of highly adapted, translucent crabs and specialized limpets that utilize unique protein coatings to insulate their tissues from the corrosive, acidic water, proving that life does not require a neutral chemical balance or solar radiation to conquer the world. It merely requires an energy source and the plasticity to turn a toxic planetary wound into a thriving sanctuary. These creatures live their entire lives in a state of chemical tension, balancing their metabolic needs against the corrosive threat of their home, displaying an extraordinary level of evolutionary specialization that redefines our understanding of biological resilience. The existence of these communities challenges the very framework through which we look at the potential for life on other worlds. If organisms can flourish in an environment dominated by liquid carbon dioxide and extreme acidity at the bottom of Earth's ocean, it opens up the distinct possibility that similar ecosystems might exist within the hidden, ice-covered oceans of moons like Enceladus or Europa. The champagne vents serve as a living laboratory for astrobiologists, providing a terrestrial analogue for the extreme environments that characterize the outer solar system. The baseline data collected here allows scientists to calibrate their sensors and design exploratory probes that will one day search for signs of life in oceans that have never known the warmth of our sun. As we trace the boundaries of this acidic oasis, the complexity of the interaction between the geology and the biology becomes increasingly clear. The vents are not isolated anomalies, but critical escape valves for the planetary internal pressure, releasing ancient carbon back into the ocean system where it can be utilized by specialized life forms. This cycle of release and capture plays a subtle yet significant role in stabilizing the long-term chemical composition of the deep ocean, preventing the accumulation of volatile gases within the crust and maintaining a delicate equilibrium that has persisted for millions of years. Furthermore, the structural design of the mineral chimneys themselves reflects the complex physics of the deep. Over time, the precipitation of minerals from the vent fluid builds up hollow towers that channel the liquid carbon dioxide high above the seabed, creating a vertical landscape of spires and minarets that mimic the architecture of an ancient, sunken city. These structures provide a complex, three-dimensional habitat for the resident fauna, offering shelter from the turbulent currents and creating distinct microclimates where the temperature and acidity vary by fractions of a degree, allowing different species to partition the space according to their specific tolerances. The quiet, continuous operation of these vents stands as a silent monument to the enduring power of the Earth's interior. While the surface world experiences the dramatic shifts of weather, seasons, and human history, this sunless laboratory continues its chemical work with an absolute mechanical regularity. It is a realm where time is measured not by the rising and setting of the sun, but by the slow growth of mineral chimneys and the steady accumulation of tectonic strain along the subduction boundary. And as we observe these specialized communities operating on the edge of chemical tolerance, we begin to perceive a grander pattern to this underworld, realizing that these acidic conduits are merely the prelude to an even more intense, thermally volatile manifestation of the planet's interior power. The path forward leads us away from the shimmering pearls of carbon dioxide and draws us toward the dark, industrial smokestacks that dominate the deepest volcanic rifts, where the heat of the mantle erupts directly into the freezing water column to challenge the very limits of existence. As we leave the shimmering columns of liquid carbon dioxide behind, the underwater landscape shifts, descending further into the volcanic rifts, where the planet's internal heat erupts with an even more volatile intensity. Here, the fissures in the fractured basaltic crust penetrate deeply into the subterranean magmatic chambers, superheating the circulating seawater to temperatures that easily exceed 400 degrees Celsius. Under the normal atmospheric conditions of our surface world, water would instantly flash into roaring steam long before reaching this thermal threshold. But the immense weight of the miles of ocean overhead prevents boiling, keeping the fluid in a superheated, ultra-dense liquid state that behaves with a terrifying chemical aggression. This extreme thermal compression changes the physical properties of the water itself, turning it into a supercritical fluid that can dissolve minerals and metals with unprecedented efficiency, acting as a highly efficient geological solvent deep within the hidden foundations of the oceanic crust. This superheated fluid leaches massive quantities of metallic sulfides, copper, iron, and zinc from the surrounding volcanic rock as it surges back upward toward the sea floor. The moment this scorching, mineral-saturated solution erupts into the near-freezing, sunless water of the deep trench, the dissolved metals instantly precipitate out of the fluid, building the towering, pitch-black mineral chimneys known to oceanographers as black smokers. These grand, dark structures rise out of the seabed like the industrial smokestacks of a subterranean factory, spewing thick, turbulent plumes of toxic, mineral-rich chemicals directly into the water column. The sight of these black plumes churning into the cold dark creates an eerie, industrial atmosphere, a stark contrast to the quiet plains of ivory sediment we left behind. The constant crystallization of these minerals ensures that the chimneys are in a state of perpetual growth, building complex, porous frameworks that channel the toxic fluids high above the surrounding ocean floor. The physical boundaries surrounding a black smoker represent one of the most extreme, radical thermal gradients found anywhere on the face of the planet. Within the space of just a few inches, the water temperature drops from a metal melting 400 degrees Celsius inside the jetting vent plume down to the near-freezing 2-degree ambient temperature of the surrounding deep ocean. This instantaneous transition creates a turbulent, highly unstable microenvironment where the physical structures of life are subjected to immense thermal and chemical stress, forcing organisms to live on a knife edge between being boiled alive or frozen solid in the dark. The sheer fluid dynamics of this mixing zone generate intense kinetic currents, swirling the mineral precipitates into dense clouds that obscure the surrounding landscape and create localized zones of highly variable chemical density. Yet, despite this absolute environmental hostility, the black smokers of the Mariana Trench are surrounded by some of the most densely populated, biologically rich ecosystems in the entire ocean world. The foundational engine of these sunless oases is a diverse array of specialized, heat-loving microbes that use the erupted hydrogen sulfide as fuel to construct complex organic molecules through chemosynthesis. These microscopic entities form the base of a unique food chain that supports giant tube worms, specialized predatory fish, and vast swarms of blind shrimp that possess specialized, light-sensitive patches on their backs designed to detect the faint, invisible infrared glow emitted by the superheated vent openings. It is a world completely independent of the sun. An ecosystem that could continue to thrive in absolute comfort even if the surface of our planet were entirely frozen over by an ice age or stripped of its atmosphere by a cosmic catastrophe. The presence of these highly specialized communities demonstrates that biological productivity can flourish without solar inputs, relying entirely on the dark geothermal energy leaking from the planet's interior. The discovery of these self-sustaining ecosystems in the absolute dark has forced astrobiologists and evolutionary chemists to fundamentally re-evaluate their theories regarding the very origin of life on our planet, giving rise to the famous hydrothermal vent birthplace hypothesis. For generations, it was a foundational assumption of science that the first living organisms must have sparked to life in a warm, sunlit tidal pool on the surface of the early Earth, fueled by solar radiation and atmospheric gases. But the existence of thriving life built around black smokers suggests a far more intriguing, subterranean alternative, that life may have actually been born in the deep, volcanic crucibles of the ocean floor, utilizing the rich, steady chemical energy of hydrothermal vents to ignite the very first metabolic pathways before migrating upward to conquer the light. This radical shift in scientific perspective transforms the deep ocean from a biological dead end into the ultimate incubator of planetary life, suggesting that the complex machinery of genetics and metabolism was forged in the dark. This hypothesis alters our understanding of our own biological lineage, suggesting that our most ancient ancestors were not children of the sun, but creatures born from the internal heat and shattered minerals of a primeval seafloor. The extreme chemistry of the vents, once viewed as a barrier to life, is now recognized as the ideal catalyst for organic synthesis, providing the precise concentration of thermal energy, mineral catalysts, and chemical gradients needed to organize basic amino acids into the first replicating cellular structures. By studying these black smokers, we are not merely looking at an alien ecosystem at the bottom of the world. We are looking backward through billions of years of geological time, staring directly into the smoky mirror of our own planetary genesis. The complex minerals forming the walls of these chimneys contain microscopic pores that could have acted as natural cell templates, concentrating organic molecules and providing the structural shelter necessary for the earliest forms of metabolic life to stabilize and evolve. The structural composition of these black smokers also provides a physical archive of the Earth's changing crust, capturing rare isotopic signatures that have remained sealed within the mantle since the formation of the globe. As the mineral chimneys grow, layer by layer, they seal these chemical records into their stone walls, creating a permanent geological logbook that scientists can drill into and read with advanced laboratory sensors. The vents function as a continuous broadcast from the interior of the Earth, delivering data about the deep thermal currents that drive the movement of the continents and shape the magnetic field of our world. Each unique band of mineral deposition marks a change in the subterranean plumbing system, chronicling the shifting pathways of magma and the changing chemistry of the deeply submerged rocks. Furthermore, the localized distribution of these black smoker fields along the tectonic boundaries creates a dynamic pattern of biological migration and extinction. Hydrothermal vents are not permanent structures. They are geologically transient, active for a few decades or centuries before the underlying volcanic pathways shift and clog, causing the chimneys to go cold and the dependent ecosystems to starve in the dark. This forces the resident species to behave as perpetual nomads, releasing billions of microscopic larvae into the deep currents in a desperate, blind search for the next erupting vent field, ensuring that the genetic lineage of the abyss remains flexible, resilient, and constantly on the move. This cyclic dance of creation and destruction requires a highly adaptive reproductive strategy, where species must allocate vast amounts of energy to dispersion to ensure their survival across vast geological distances. The relationship between the volcanic energy of the black smokers and the cold stability of the wider trench highlights the profound duality that defines this underworld. It is a realm where the ultimate destruction of subduction plates meets the literal creation of new mineral structures, and where the absolute hostility of superheated toxicity fuels the most vibrant, resilient forms of life. The deep is not a place of stagnant decay, but a complex, high-energy engine that drives the chemical and biological evolution of our planet from the bottom up. As these thermal plumes rise into the water column, they disperse vital nutrients throughout the deep ocean layers, feeding the wider marine systems and creating a vast web of chemical interactions that connects the absolute bottom of the world to the broader oceanic currents. The study of these hydrothermal oases also reshapes the parameters used by scientists searching for life on other worlds within our solar system. The confirmation that thriving ecosystems can exist independently of solar radiation means that icy moons with subsurface oceans, such as Europa and Enceladus, are no longer dismissed as inherently sterile environments. The volcanic activity driving the black smokers on Earth could easily be replicated on the seafloors of these distant celestial bodies, fueled by the intense tidal flexing caused by the gravity of their parent planets. By examining the survival strategies of the extremophiles living around these rifts, we are developing the precise analytical models needed to detect the subtle chemical signatures of life hidden beneath miles of extraterrestrial ice. Moreover, the intricate architecture of these black smokestacks reveals a complex interaction between inorganic chemistry and structural mechanics. The precipitation of minerals does not happen randomly. It follows the lines of fluid flow and thermal differential, creating hollow, vascular spires that can reach heights of several stories before collapsing under their own massive weight. These structures form a dynamic, vertical topography in an otherwise flat landscape, offering an array of distinct niches where specialized organisms can position themselves according to their exact preferences for temperature and mineral concentration. The outer walls of the chimneys are often cooler and support completely different microbial communities than the inner channels, establishing a highly compartmentalized ecosystem within a single mineral structure. This complex biological zoning creates a highly competitive yet cooperative matrix of life where every square inch of surface area is utilized. The microbes coating the rock faces actively transform the toxic compounds into benign organic materials, effectively detoxifying the immediate environment for the larger invertebrates that browse upon them. The blind shrimp that crowd these surfaces are finely tuned to the rhythmic pulsations of the vent fluid, moving with agility to collect food while avoiding the lethal core of the superheated jet. This level of behavioral precision highlights the profound impact that environmental pressure has on the evolution of animal behavior, refining sensory systems to a degree that matches the extreme demands of the landscape. As we look deeper into the dynamics of these deep-sea systems, the traditional view of the ocean floor as a remote and isolated boundary is utterly dismantled. The thermal energy released by the black smokers is a vital component of the global planetary heat budget, helping to cool the interior of the Earth and maintain the delicate thermal balance that allows our surface world to remain stable. The chemical inputs from these vents alter the salinity and mineral content of the global ocean, influencing everything from the growth of surface plankton to the long-term storage of carbon within the deep seafloor sediments, binding the surface and the abyss into a single, unified system. And as we prepare to leave these dark, industrial smokestacks behind, allowing the freezing currents to draw us away from the thermal warmth of the rifts, we look forward toward the final, most hostile zone of our descent. We are moving beyond the volcanic oases, stepping out into the vast, sunless plains of the Hadal underworld, where no vent fluids offer energy and no internal heat softens the cold reality of the water column, setting the stage for a final confrontation with the true, unyielding rulers of the absolute deep. The warmth fades rapidly as we recede into the darkness, the industrial roar of the churning plumes giving way once more to the absolute, crushing silence that defines the true nature of the Great Trench. As the thermal warmth of the black smokers fades into the distance, we enter the final and most profound realm of the Mariana Trench, where the landscape is defined entirely by absolute cold, crushing pressure, and vast expanses of undisturbed, pale sediment. Away from the localized energy of the volcanic vents and the chaotic shifts of the tectonic boundaries lies the true, unchanging expanse of the Hadal Zone, stretching downward from 6,000 meters to the deepest floor of the Challenger Deep. This is an environment that feels entirely disconnected from the active, fiery processes of the Earth's interior, presenting a stark, monochromatic world where time appears to stand still beneath miles of heavy water. The profound stillness of these plains creates an atmosphere of ancient permanence, masking the violent geological forces that continually reshape the boundaries of the trench overhead. In this sunless domain, the physical reality of hydrostatic pressure is the ultimate arbiter of existence, exerting an incredible force that presses down upon every square inch of the seabed with relentless, crushing severity. At these extreme depths, the water column pushes inward with a weight equivalent to thousands of pounds per square inch, creating an environment that would instantly annihilate unprotected life or structural engineering. Yet, rather than a lifeless void, these abyssal plains support a specialized, highly resilient community of organisms that have evolved to treat this immense pressure not as a destructive force, but as an integral component of their fundamental biochemistry. The sheer physical weight of the ocean becomes the structural matrix that holds their specialized cellular architectures together, inverting the normal rules of biological survival. The residents of these deep plains, ranging from microscopic xenophyrophores to the elusive Mariana snailfish, demonstrate an extraordinary level of physiological adaptation that continues to baffle marine biologists. Their cellular membranes, enriched with specialized fatty acids, remain fluid and functional under conditions that would cause ordinary biological tissue to lock up like solid glass. proteins and enzymes are tightly stabilized by chemical shields like trimethylamine N-oxide, preventing the crushing weight of the water from deforming their molecular structures. These creatures do not merely survive the abyss, they are entirely dependent on its unique physical parameters, unable to exist if removed from the profound pressures of their native home. Every protein fold and lipid bilayer is a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, tuned precisely to the merciless physics of the deep. The floor itself is a vast rolling desert of fine, powdery silt, composed of the skeletal remains of microscopic plankton and organic dust that has drifted down through the water column over millions of years. This slow rain of nutrients serves as the primary energy source for the entire Hadal ecosystem, feeding vast populations of scavengers and detritivores that comb through the sediment in total darkness. Amphipods, sea cucumbers, and specialized worms crawl across this pale expanse, processing the nutrient-poor mud with meticulous efficiency, ensuring that every morsel of organic debris is fully recycled back into the biological networks of the trench. This deep-sea detritus cycle represents a masterclass in efficiency, where nothing is wasted and every trace of energy is wrung from the falling debris of the sunlit world above. The sheer isolation of these deep basins has turned the trench into an evolutionary laboratory, where isolated pockets of the seafloor host distinct species found nowhere else on the planet. Because the physical barriers separating the different troughs create insurmountable pressure and temperature gradients, species are locked into their respective zones, fostering a high degree of endemism. As our exploratory probes continue to map these hidden valleys, every new video feed and sediment sample reveals unexpected complexities in how life distributes itself across the most remote regions of the globe, proving that the deep ocean is a dynamic, evolving sanctuary rather than a static graveyard. The genetic divergence observed in these isolated trenches offers profound insights into how species adapt to extreme fragmentation and ecological stress over evolutionary timeframes. Yet, even as we marvel at the resilience of these creatures, we are continually reminded that no place on Earth is truly beyond the reach of human influence. The presence of synthetic industrial chemicals discovered within the tissues of amphipods at the very bottom of the Challenger Deep serves as a sobering reminder of our global footprint. These persistent pollutants have drifted down from the surface world, infiltrating the food webs of the deepest trenches and marking the sediment with our industrial history. The abyss acts as a silent archive, capturing the consequences of our actions in the chemistry of its most isolated inhabitants. This chemical contamination shatters the comforting illusion of pristine isolation, proving that the circulation systems of the ocean bind our modern industrial society directly to the most remote abyssal plains. The exploration of this final frontier demands an extraordinary level of technological sophistication and scientific humility. Every descent made by a submersible or an automated lander tests the absolute limits of human engineering against the unyielding laws of physics, pushing us to refine our methods and expand our understanding of what life can endure. The Mariana Trench is no longer viewed merely as a geographical curiosity, but as a critical component of our planet's global system, regulating chemical cycles, stabilizing climate patterns, and holding the answers to fundamental questions about our biological origins. The technological tools we forge to pierce this darkness represent the pinnacle of our scientific ambition, yet they also humble us by revealing how much of our own world remains beyond our direct reach. And as we drift quietly across these final obsidian plains, letting the pale mud fade into the surrounding shadows, we realize that the journey into the abyss is ultimately a journey of self-discovery. The trench strips away the illusions of human isolation, binding our surface world to the coldest, deepest foundations of the planet, in a fragile, intricate web of ecological and chemical reality. The descent teaches us respect for the immense forces that shape our world, leaving us standing on the threshold of the final segment, where the ultimate lessons of the deep converge into a lasting vision of our shared planetary home. As we arrive at the absolute conclusion of our deep-sea journey, hovering quietly above the dark and silent floor of the Challenger Deep, we are forced to confront the ultimate legacy of the Mariana Trench. This remote chasm, carved by the relentless collision of tectonic plates and shrouded in perpetual freezing darkness, has evolved from an abstract geographical curiosity into a vital archive of our planet's history and future. The trench stands as a monument to the immense, patient forces of geology, demonstrating how the slow, violent subduction of the Earth's crust continually reshapes the surface of our world, while simultaneously sheltering ecosystems that operate entirely independently of the sun. It is a realm that challenges our most fundamental assumptions about biology, physics, and the limits of endurance, proving that life is not a fragile accident of the surface, but a stubborn, pervasive force capable of conquering the most hostile environments imaginable. The sheer physical scale of this chasm dwarfs our human perceptions of time and space, reducing our monumental surface achievements to fleeting moments in the ancient, unyielding chronicle of the abyss. When we reflect upon the long history of human interaction with the deep ocean, from the clumsy, gasoline-filled floats of the mid-20th century bathyscaphes to the sleek, titanium-hulled submersibles of the modern era, we see a continuous evolution in our capacity for wonder and scientific inquiry. The men who first peered through the thick plexiglass windows of the Trieste did not merely log a depth record. They opened a door to a new dimension of human understanding, shattering the long-held dogma that the bottom of the world was a sterile wasteland. Every subsequent expedition, whether crewed by lone explorers or guided by automated robotic arms, has chipped away at the veil of mystery, replacing superstitious myths of ancient sea monsters with the breathtaking reality of extremophile bacteria, translucent snailfish, and vast, silent plains of silica and mud. Yet, the true significance of the trench extends far beyond its biological wonders and geological majesty, serving instead as a profound mirror reflecting our responsibilities as stewards of the Earth. The discovery of synthetic industrial chemicals trapped within the tissues of hadal amphipods shatters the comforting illusion of distance and isolation, reminding us that no ecosystem on our planet is immune to the consequences of human activity. The deep ocean acts as an ultimate archive, quietly recording our industrial history in the chemistry of its most resilient inhabitants. This realization forces a fundamental shift in how we perceive our relationship with the natural world, linking the air we breathe and the land we inhabit directly to the cold, crushing depths of the abyssal plains. We are forced to acknowledge that the health of the surface world and the purity of the trench are inextricably bound together by the relentless circulation of global currents and geochemical cycles, leaving no sanctuary untouched by our modern footprint. This profound ecological connection elevates the study of the Hadal Zone from a niche academic pursuit to an urgent planetary imperative. As climate change, ocean acidification, and industrial pollution continue to alter the chemistry of our surface waters, the deep ocean absorbs the shockwaves of our changing world, acting as a massive, stabilizing thermal and chemical sink. The delicate balance maintained within the trench, from the chemosynthetic oases of the black smokers to the slow, silent recycling of organic detritus across the sediment plains, plays a quiet yet critical role in the broader stability of the global biosphere. To ignore the deep sea is to ignore the foundational plumbing of our entire planet, operating under the dangerous assumption that what remains out of sight is safely out of reach. The technological triumphs that allowed human explorers and automated probes to pierce the veil of the Hadal Zone represent the pinnacle of our scientific ambition, but they also serve to humble us. Every descent into the trench teaches us a lesson in scientific humility, reminding us that our advanced instruments are merely scratching the surface of a vast, complex planetary system that operates on scales far beyond our immediate control. The engineering marvels required to withstand 8 tons of pressure per square inch are testaments to human ingenuity, yet they also highlight our biological fragility, reminding us that we are visitors in an alien domain that requires absolute respect and caution. We cannot conquer the abyss. We can only bear witness to it, learning its rules and adapting our understanding to fit the uncompromising reality of its laws. As we look back up through the 7 miles of dark water toward the sunlit world above, we carry with us the knowledge that the abyss is not a separate, alien realm, but an integral, foundational part of our shared home. The midnight sleep of the deep trenches remains undisturbed by our passing, a timeless monument of silence and shadow that will continue to guard the secrets of the earth long after our modern civilization has faded into history. The shifting tectonic plates will continue their slow-motion grind, the hydrothermal vents will cycle through their fiery lifespans, and the silent rain of organic dust will continue to drift down through the eternal night, maintaining a rhythm of existence that predates humanity by eons and will endure long after we are gone. This final realization draws our epic descent to a close, leaving us with a renewed reverence for the profound mysteries that lie hidden just beneath the waves, waiting in the eternal dark for future generations to seek, question, and understand. The journey into the midnight sleep of the Mariana Trench is ultimately a journey inward, an exploration of our own place within the grand, interconnected tapestry of planetary evolution. It challenges us to look beyond the immediate horizons of our daily lives, to weigh our actions against the silent endurance of the deep, and to cherish the fragile, beautiful world we share, from the highest mountain peaks down to the absolute, unyielding bottom of the sea.